Greetings, welcome, vanakkam. Today is certainly a very important, crucially important day in global affairs. In a short while from now, President Donald Trump will meet with President Putin, Vladimir Putin, in Alaska. Apparently, this is an exercise aimed at establishing or re establishing peace in Ukraine. And President Trump projects himself as a man of peace, a president for peace. And he, ever since assuming office as the President of the United States of America, has been very self consciously busy making peace or establishing peace here, there, and everywhere. Of course, things have not turned out the way he thought they would. And now a bit of sad realism seems to be dawning on him that things may not always work out as he wants them to. Therefore, his approach to the possible outcome of the Alaska exercise sounds increasingly timid and tentative. Even so, we must give him credit for endeavoring because it's not an easy thing to handle a person like Putin. And as I said in a video shared with you many months ago, Putin, Trump clearly underestimated Putin. Why he did so, only he can answer. But it was obvious to me that in the way Trump was handling Putin, he committed serious tactical blunders. And you commit blunders when you don't understand your adversary. So, even as I regard this exercise, and even as I feel somewhat grateful to Trump for taking the trouble to try out these possibilities, I have the following reflections to offer. First of all, Trump projects himself as a Christian. So I would assume that Trump is familiar with Jesus' idea of making peace. Jesus actually doesn't think of peacemaking as a deal. In fact, that's the exact opposite of Jesus' idea of establishing peace. Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers." I remember making a video on this very passage a year ago. So I will not repeat any of the insights already shared with you through that video, except make a very functional, perfunctory reference to a basic idea there, namely that making peace is quite different from negotiating peace or working out an armistice or a cessation of hostilities, which always falls short of peace. Now, even as Trump busies himself with this process, about which at times he sounds rather desperate, dispirited, and exasperated, understandably so, because that's what happens to you when you deal with Putin. He must understand that peace cannot be established, unlike negotiating a temporary cessation of hostilities. Peace cannot be established unless the foundation for peace is created. Now, in this regard, the most important idea from my point of view is that what undermines peace or what brings about hostilities, conflicts, wars, bloodshed, murder, destruction is a very strong propensity in human nature which makes peoples and nations act unilaterally. That's most important. unilateral actions. All unilateral actions, that is one sided actions, in contrast to actions which are mutually agreed on, all unilateral actions are bound to be unjust and violent. And therefore, all unilateral actions, projects, initiatives, stratagems are bound to spew up conflicts, atrocities, destruction, and death from time to time. As long as this tendency on the part of individuals, societies, and nations to act unilaterally is not confronted, understood aright, and mastered, an enduring foundation for peace cannot be built in this world. Why do people act unilaterally? It's because they are bothered only about their own interests. And therefore, they try to push or pursue their interests at the expense of or to the detriment of the interests of others. That's why you act unilaterally. It's in opposition to this that Jesus promulgates the idea, an idea that's also found in the spiritual ethics of other religions, that we must treat others as we would like them to treat us. So, this is the opposite of unilateralism. This is what's called reciprocity or mutuality. Rather than act only according to your own personal interests understood unilaterally, act in a state of social, psychological, ethical equilibrium. Your interests are important, but equally the interest of the other person. Your interest as a nation is important. Equally, the interests of the other nation must also be considered important. It is this balance, it's this equilibrium that is required. It's when equilibrium is lost, it's natural that a society or a nation falls head over heels onto the other side. It plummets into violence. Like, for example, if you're walking on the street and you happen to step on a banana peel, you lose your equilibrium and then you have a violent fall. That's exactly what happens to societies and nations. Now you think of what happened in Ukraine 3 years ago. Putin acted unilaterally. Putin did not consult anyone. Putin did not take permission from Zelensky uh, to attack Ukraine. One fine morning, a very long column of deadly military weapons rolled over the boundary and marched straight to Kiev. So, this tendency to act unilaterally spews up violence, whether it is in interpersonal relations or inter group relations, international relations at all levels. The principle that destabilizes peace and unleashes war and violence is the principle of unilateralism. And the irony here, which seems to be lost on many people, is a man who projects himself as an agent of peace is one who acts only unilaterally. Trump doesn't believe in consulting anyone. Now, think of the strange situation in which the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, as well has to say repeatedly, look, if you decide matters so important for the destiny of Ukraine, please involve Ukraine. Don't decide everything pertaining to Ukraine without consulting the will of the people of Ukraine, without giving even the president of Ukraine the opportunity to represent the will of the people. Dozens of world leaders are telling Trump the same thing, yet he doesn't seem to understand this very basic principle on which war and peace rest. Trump is acting unilaterally. And unilateralism is the very seed of war and violence. It is this monstrous contradiction that I want to bring to your notice. Therefore, in my opinion, Trump is not a suitable agent of peace because he is not a peaceful man himself. He is not someone who understands peace. He is after peace because he thinks that establishing peace, or at least bringing about ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia, will make him eligible for the Nobel Prize for Peace. Now, whether that is actually the sound motivation for negotiating peace or a peaceful settlement between the two warring countries is up to you to decide. I have nothing more to say on the matter. So please understand this very basic principle. Now, in India, for example, there was a time when members of the majority community and members of the minority communities in India, there are 5 designated minority communities, nationally designated. Though each state is free to declare minorities according to its own demographic pattern. Now, there was a fair degree of mutuality obtained between members of the majority community and members of the minority communities. There was also some degree of mutuality obtained between parties, the ruling coalition and the coalition in opposition. Now, please notice that this is now all but ruined. The tendency to act more and more unilaterally, more and more violently, more and more aggressively is gaining ground in India. And therefore, even as this cancer of unilateralism spreads through the body politic of our country, you will find Indian society becoming more and more restless, more and more inclined toward violence and bloodshed, more and more cruelty. The only way this national disease can be healed is by shifting from unilateralism to mutuality. But unfortunately, in the prevailing climate of opinion in India, this would be considered weakness. And that's the problem. Anyway, let's not divert our attention from what's going to happen in Alaska. Well, it is Friday in India, but still Thursday in Alaska. So let's say tomorrow, if you like, whereas it is today from the Indian context, Friday. So this is the first thing. Unless and until the principle of mutuality or reciprocity is affirmed without any alibi, without any excuse, I'm afraid a foundation for enduring peace in this region cannot be created. That's point number one. Point number two, in order to create peace on an enduring foundation, and I'm now going to borrow an idea from the German philosopher Immanuel Kant, and I strongly recommend to my viewers this very short work titled Perpetual Peace, Principles for Perpetual Peace. You see, in the latter half of the 18th century and second half of the 19th century, it was quite fashionable in Europe to talk about perpetual peace, enduring peace. Why? Because if you examine world history from the very beginning until now, history is characterized by chronic conflicts and wars. History is basically a history of war, with peace as occasional interludes. And interestingly, whenever peace treaties were negotiated, it turned out, for some good reason, that all these treaties were short lived. Thousands of peace treaties have been worked out in the past. None of them, absolutely none of them, lasted more than 5 years. So that is the reality of the world. Now, the reason why peace proves short lived is that often peace is established on a foundation of injustice. Immanuel Kant, in his work that I referred to, Perpetual Peace, which can be easily downloaded from the net, digital forms of that book are available. He says, no peace which fails to do justice to both parties can endure. That's absolutely true. If you take a bird's eye view of history, you will find that this is absolutely the case. After all, the Second World War is a direct product of the injustice done to Germany post the First World War. Um, uh, the intention may have been pragmatic, but the effect was completely inimical to establishing peace, and therefore the Second World War was a logical necessity. So, I don't want to prolong this reflection. To me, it seems that President Donald J. Trump, in his eagerness to somehow bring about a negotiated settlement or ceasefire between the two countries, is overlooking this very basic aspect of peace, which makes me conclude, and I shall actually conclude on that President Trump is not interested in peace. This is my sincere conviction. He is interested more in a Nobel Prize for himself. He is also interested in creating a legacy for himself. He wants to be known in a certain fashion in history. And that's why in every speech he makes, he unfailingly, invariably states that none before me, none before me. Never in the history of America it happened like this. Never before, never before. That shows the outlook of a man who is desperate to create a legacy for himself. But if I were to give a small piece of advice to Donald Trump, fortunately he doesn't have to listen to me. I have to tell him that the best way to ruin your legacy is to get obsessed with it. That again is a lesson that history teaches us. So, what do I expect from Alaska? Frankly, nothing. You might think that I'm a cynic. I hope I'm a cynic. I hope I'm proved a cynic in this respect. But I doubt if I'll be proved a cynic. I wish I could be proved a cynic. If the two insights that I've shared with you through this video are relevant, if those insights, and these are insights drawn entirely from history, if those insights still hold, I can assure you that the outcome of the Alaska exercise will be a little more disappointing than most people think it would be. But again, hoping against hope, I sincerely wish that this misery would be brought to a close. And may President Donald J. Trump have a feather on his cap. After all, he doesn't seem to have many, nor does he seem likely to have many more. And therefore, at least this one feather on his cap. Thank you. All the very best. May peace prevail on planet Earth, and may a sense of universal brotherhood fortify a sense of belonging together as a human family in this small little beautiful planet where it's a privilege to live even one day. Thank you. Goodbye.